007's after a man named Le Chiffre, and the stakes are high. The reader is Alex Jennings.
When Bond left the bar, he walked purposefully along the pavement flanking the tree-lined boulevard towards his hotel a few hundred yards away. There were few people abroad, and the two men standing quietly under a tree on the opposite side of the boulevard looked out of place. Each wore a straw hat, and they had the appearance of a variety turn waiting for a bus on the way to the theatre. Incongruously, each dark, squat little figure was illuminated by a touch of bright colour, a bright red and a bright blue camera case slung from the shoulder. By the time Bond had taken in these details, he had come to within 50 yards of the two men. He was reflecting on the possibilities of cover when an extraordinary and terrible scene was enacted. Red Man seemed to give a short nod to Blue Man. Blue Man, and Bond could not see exactly as the trunk of a plane tree obscured his vision, bent forward and seemed to fiddle with his camera case. Then, with a blinding flash of white light, there was the ear-splitting crack of a monstrous explosion, and Bond, despite the protection of the tree trunk, was slammed down to the pavement by a bolt of hot air. He lay, gazing up at the sun, while the air went on twanging with the explosion, as if someone had hit the bass register of a piano with a sledgehammer. When, dazed and half-conscious, he raised himself on one knee, a ghastly rain of pieces of flesh and shreds of blood-soaked clothing fell on him. The road was a smoking crater. Of the two men in straw hats, there remained absolutely nothing. Bond felt himself starting to vomit. It was Mattis who got to him first, and by that time Bond was standing with his arm round the tree which had saved his life. He allowed Mattis to lead him off towards the Splendide, from which guests and servants were pouring in chattering fright. They managed to push through the throng and along the corridor to Bond's room. Mattis paused only to turn on the radio in front of the fireplace. Then, while Bond stripped off his blood-flecked clothes, Mattis sprayed him with questions.
"Merde, but you are lucky," he said when Bond had finished. "Clearly the bomb was intended for you. They intended to throw it and then dodge behind their tree. But it all came out the other way around. Never mind, we will discover the facts." His eyes glittered. "Now, get a drink and some lunch and a rest," he ordered Bond. "For me, I must get my nose quickly into this affair before the police have muddied the trail with their big black boots." He turned off the radio and waved an affectionate farewell. Bond sat for a while by the window and enjoyed being alive. Bond had always been a gambler. He loved the dry riffle of the cards and the constant, unemphatic drama of the quiet figures round the green tables. He was amused by the impartiality of the roulette ball and of the playing cards, and their eternal bias. On this June evening, when Bond walked into the salle privée, it was with a sensation of confidence and cheerful anticipation that he changed 1,000,000 francs into plaques of 50,000 and took a seat next to the chef de partie at roulette table number 1. Bond borrowed the chef's card and studied the run of the ball since the session had started at 3 o'clock that afternoon. He always did this, although he knew that each turn of the wheel, each fall of the ball into a numbered slot, has absolutely no connection with its predecessor. He accepted that the game begins afresh each time the croupier picks up the ivory ball and gives one of the 4 spokes of the wheel a controlled twist clockwise. Bond decided to play one of his favourite gambits and back the first 2 dozen numbers, each with the maximum, 100,000 francs. After 7 coups, he had won 6 times. His net profit was 400,000 francs. He kept off the table for the 8th throw. 0 turned up. This piece of luck cheered him further, and he decided to back the first and last dozens until he had lost twice. 10 throws later, he rose from the table, 1,000,000 francs to the good. Directly Bond had started playing in maximums, his game had become the centre of interest at the table. An American had shown more than the usual friendliness and pleasure at his winning streak. When Bond rose, he too pushed back his chair and called cheerfully across the table. "Thanks for the ride. Guess I owe you a drink. Will you join me?" Bond had a feeling that this might be the CIA man. "My name's Felix Leiter," said the American. "Glad to meet you." "Mine's Bond. James Bond." Bond insisted on ordering Leiter's Haig and Haig on the rocks, and then he looked carefully at the barman. "A dry martini," he said. "One, in a deep champagne goblet." "Oui, monsieur." "Just a moment. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quina lillet. Shake it very well until it's ice cold, then add a large thin slice of lemon peel. Got it?" "Certainly, monsieur." The barman seemed pleased with the idea. "Gosh, that's certainly a drink," said Leiter. Bond laughed. "When I'm concentrating," he explained, "I never have more than 1 drink before dinner. But I do like that one to be large and very strong and very cold and very well made. This drink's my own invention. I'm going to patent it, when I can think of a good name." Leiter lowered his voice. "You better call it the Molotov cocktail after the one you tasted this afternoon." Bond laughed. They sat down. "I'm glad to be working with you on this job," Leiter said. "Our people are definitely interested. In fact, Washington's pretty sick we're not running the show. Anyway, I'm under your orders, and I'm to give you any help you ask for." "I'm delighted you are," said Bond. "I'd be grateful if you'd stick around the casino this evening. I've got an assistant, a Miss Lind, and I'd like to hand her over to you when I start playing. You won't be ashamed of her. She's a good-looking girl." He smiled at Leiter. "And you might mark Le Chiffre's 2 gunmen. I can't imagine he'll try a roughhouse, but you never know." They parted company after arranging to see each other at the casino at around 10:30 or 11, the usual hour for the high tables to begin play. As Bond tied his thin, double-ended black satin tie, he paused for a moment and examined himself levelly in the mirror. His grey-blue eyes looked calmly back with a hint of ironical inquiry. He opened a drawer and took out a light chamois leather holster and slipped it over his left shoulder so that it hung about 3 inches below his armpit. He slipped his single-breasted dinner jacket over his heavy silk evening shirt, verified in the mirror that there was absolutely no sign of the flat gun under his left arm, gave a final pull at his narrow tie, and walked out of the door and locked it. When he turned at the foot of the short stairs towards the bar, he heard the lift door open behind him, and a cool voice call, "Good evening." It was the girl. He had remembered her beauty exactly. He was not surprised to be thrilled by it again. Her dress was of black velvet, and there was a thin necklace of diamonds at her throat. Bond's heart lifted. "You look absolutely lovely. Business must be good in the radio world." She put her arm through his. "Do you mind if we go straight into dinner?" she asked. "I want to make a grand entrance, and the truth is there's a horrible secret about black velvet. It marks when you sit down." "Of course. Let's go straight in." In her wake, he watched the heads of the diners turn to look at her. As they deciphered the maze of purple ink which covered the menu, Bond beckoned to the sommelier. "A small carafe of vodka, very cold," Bond ordered. He said to her abruptly, "I can't drink the health of your new frock without knowing your Christian name." "Vesper," she said. Bond gave her a look of inquiry. "I was born on a very stormy evening, according to my parents," she smiled. "Some people like it, others don't. I'm just used to it." "I think it's a fine name," said Bond. An idea struck him. "Can I borrow it?" He explained about the special martini he had invented. "The Vesper," he said. "It's very appropriate to the violet hour when my cocktail will now be drunk all over the world. We'll have one together when all this is finished. Win or lose. And now, here's luck for tonight, Vesper." "Yes," said the girl quietly, as she held up her small glass and looked at him with a curious directness straight in the eyes. Then she leant impulsively towards him. "I have some news for you from Mattis. He was longing to tell you himself. It's about the bomb."
Bond looked round, but there was no possibility of being overheard. "Tell me." His eyes glittered with interest.
"Apparently the men were part of a pool held in France for this sort of job, saboteurs, thugs, and so on." She took a sip of vodka. "The agent who briefed them gave them the 2 camera cases you saw. He told them that the blue case contained a very powerful smoke bomb. The red case was the explosive. They would escape under cover of the smoke. In fact, both cases contained an identical high-explosive bomb. The idea was to destroy you and the bomb-throwers without trace."
"Go on," said Bond, full of admiration for the ingenuity of the double-cross.
"Well, apparently the men decided to take no chances. It would be better, they thought, to touch off the smoke bomb first, and of course they both went up together. A third man was waiting behind the Splendide to pick his 2 friends up. When he saw what had happened, he assumed they had bungled. But the police picked up some fragments of the unexploded red bomb, and he was confronted with them. When he saw that they had been tricked, he started to talk. But there's nothing to link all this with Le Chiffre. Le Chiffre's name means absolutely nothing to the one who survived."
She finished her story just as the waiters arrived with caviar and a mound of hot toast.
"Incidentally,"
Bond asked,
"how did you come to get mixed up in this affair? What section are you in?" "I'm personal assistant to Head of S," said Vesper. "As it was his plan, he wanted his section to have a hand in the operation, and he asked M if I could go. I had to meet Mattis in Paris and come down with him. I've got a friend who is a vendeuse with Dior, and somehow she managed to borrow me this frock. Otherwise I couldn't possibly have competed with all these people."
She made a gesture towards the room.
"The office was very jealous that I was to work with the 00. Of course you're our heroes. I was enchanted."
Bond frowned. "It's not difficult to get a 00 number if you're prepared to kill people," he said. "How do you like your caviar?"
"I'm loving my dinner. It seems a shame."
She stopped, warned by a cold look in Bond's eye. "If it wasn't for the job, we wouldn't be here," he said. Suddenly he regretted the intimacy of their dinner, and of their talk. "Let's consider what has to be done," he said in a matter-of-fact voice. She listened to him coldly, but with obedience.
"Don't imagine that this is going to be any fun," her chief had said. "He thinks of nothing but the job on hand, and while it's on, he's absolute hell to work for."
"Don't fall for him. I don't think he's got much heart." Now, at a hint that they were finding pleasure together, Bond had suddenly turned to ice and had brutally veered away as if warmth were poison to him. She felt hurt and foolish. Then she gave a mental shrug and concentrated with all her attention on what he was saying. She would not make the same mistake again.